defining magnificence into mediocrity and calling it magnificence. I'm going to be going through many different windows to look at this and explain a bigger picture that's been growing with this man since 2006. I'm going to share some background that is part of what's become Love for Life, and why this man pulled out of the system, why this man created this garden, why this man is living the way this man is living, and has stuck to the guns of this ever since, and refused to change from this path. This issue of magnificence is really built on confusion. I'm going to work really hard on not accusing anyone. I've spent years going after occultists, going after, these Freemasons and all that. But in the end, after all is said and done, when you look at the bigger picture, they're trapped in this mediocrity, as everyone else in the system, including this man, have been trapped in mediocrity, defined as magnificence, since we were got at from the womb or after the womb, through the definitions that defined the fantasies of perceived realities. And this is going to be a long video. This will not be a short video, because it's going to encompass the circumstances of my partner Fiona, what's happening for her, and what's bringing to a head everything that we dreamt for and need to see happen in this life that we live, in this dream that we hold of magnificence, that has brought about confronting what's stopping us being that, and gradually chipping away at the coalface of this mediocrity, and opening up that true magnificence that we are built out of, and that all of creation is, and not pushing that away anymore and writing it off as utopia and dreams of fantasy that are at arm's length. It's out there. Yeah, Arthur, it's great. Kingdom, the magnificent kingdom. Yeah, it's great, Arthur, but come on, get back to reality, boy. That kind of stuff. Let me tell you that the doubt and uncertainty is so enriched in the mediocrity that is burgeoning, bubbling. It's like the witch's warlock that makes in their what do you call those big things in their broom? I forgot. I got a mental block on that one, but it's bubbling with doubt and uncertainty, because we don't know who we are. We don't know who we are. So I'm not going to go after Freemasons and occultists. This is really going to the biggest picture, where we all are in on this and we're all responsible for this. So I'm going to work at coming at this from many different ways. And if the brain is still functioning good enough, because it's all started clicking for me when I was having a shower this morning. Those of you who know, I've been building a lattice here in this garden around this rental property. And we were given a termination notice, 3 months, 6th November. We've been here 13 years then in this rental property. And I just got inspired to really go back and look at the bigger picture here. So be patient with me. There may be repetition that'll come up. I'm not too sure how this will eventuate. I'm just going to be in the moment and just let this unfold. So yes, Fiona, a couple of days ago, received a termination notice from the agents, on instructions from the title holders, the claimed owners of this land, that they want to reclaim the property. So it's not an eviction. It's more that it's time for us to move on, which we do. We want to move on. However, the circumstances that we find our lives in is that with Fiona's very low income, which includes Centrelink parenting payments, bit of rent assistance, and then her full-time part-time work that she does, is not enough. to get in the system an application approved to relocate somewhere else on land, bigger land, because we want to move to bigger land. And we've written to the agent and told them this, that look, it's great, we really want to move, and we've been wanting to move. And about 4 or 5 years ago, we looked very hard at moving, but we didn't have the financial resources, the system resources to make such a move through acquisition or through manpower, through others who want to, build a bridge or be the wind under each other's wings of contributing fictional dollars to a bigger dream of a bigger piece of land and all that sort of stuff. So none of those things at that point eventuated. And I can see in hindsight why, because there were still so many things we needed to face and learn about this magnificence defined into mediocrity. And because if we don't know the big picture, if we don't know it clear enough, we'll bring mediocrity into dreams that we believe are coming from magnificence that are actually compromised and have like holes in a bucket. It's going to allow mediocrity to keep coming in and undermining magnificent dreams. And that's that good heart in all of us, because all of us that arrive in the womb come with a good heart. There's no man that does not have a good heart. Everyone has a good heart. And yet it's everyone with a good heart that's doing harm and causing immense destruction, believing they're doing the right thing from their good heart. And this is this inculcation through the definitions that define their perceptions of reality, that they fall in love with, the fake self that was produced out of that, which I'll talk about in this video again, because we have to go through this. And I'll touch on some themes as well to help build the basis model of this. You can call it an argument if you want, of how we're all on the wrong track, and what we've got to do to in sacrifice, because we're going to have to sacrifice a lot to get ourselves back to the true path, which is undefined. So I don't want to define you through these definitions. I just want you to sense where this man's intention is coming from. So don't believe anything I'm saying, but just if you watch this video later, because I will upload it to YouTube, I must stress the point too, the loveforlife.com.au website has been down for about probably 5-6 weeks now, and it will be maybe down still for a few more weeks, because the database for Love for Life is Drupal 5, which is a 2005 platform that had stopped being supported by the Drupal networks around 2010. Love for Life that was using Drupal 5 was built in 2006 and launched in 2006, had survived all this time up until that 5-6 week period ago, where it received major security breaches through nefarious others out there, and compromised the server, which is where the Love for Life website's being hosted. So it had to be taken down, and fair enough. So until the website is back up in Drupal 8, and which has been worked on it as we're talking by someone who's doing this part-time for us, we only got Facebook and YouTube at the moment to present this work. So maybe let others know. Well, I will put notifications up in this video when it's finished that, that just stick to Facebook and the YouTube channel, and I'll put the links up for those who don't know it, anyone new to what we're doing here. But going back to defining magnificence into mediocrity and calling it magnificence, this is every man raised in the system, living lives of mediocrity, with good hearts, calling out love, immense love, but it's all filtered through this mediocrity, so that the magnificence of what they hold in their heart has been compromised severely, distorted. And in fact, those who do this, and there's millions of us doing this, you'll see this love is the answer, love is the key, love is all this, all is one, we must come together as one. Now the sentiment, it's everywhere now, and it was planned to be like this. It's still mediocrity. There's still no true magnificence present in all of this, because it was defined. And the cunning and the guile of those behind this, the occultists and those who've done this, because the very brush they paint in doing this deception was done to them too. So they are doing it from their own confusion, where all the destructive emotions reside from, which is their arrogance, their indifference, their coldness, their iciness. They scorn you, they laugh at you, they ignore you. They're very good at ignoring the man. They must ignore the magnificence of the man. And the whole system is built on ignoring that magnificence. So even when you go into their courts, they will not see you, the man. They do not look at the magnificence. They can only look at the mediocrity that you've become, that you believe that you are under the name that you call out when they call your name. And this gets into, sort of Admiralty law and UCC and all this sort of stuff. Another thing, there is a link in Facebook, and I'll put it in this broadcast at the end when this is finished and it's put up, to image labels. And I've been dumping a lot of work over for the last 2 months and a bit, maybe 2.5 months. In there, there is cursing going on from this man, dealing with a guy called John Matheson, who ignores all these insights. And so it was a really interesting 2.5 months of this expose to show how this works, how this mediocrity is allowed to perpetuate, how everyone is encouraged to stay in the system, stay in the court system, stay in the law, stay in all this, and thinking it's going to help fix it. It will not fix anything. It'll fix nothing. You've got to step outside of all of this. And if we don't, nothing changes. In spite of how strong our good heart resonates, do no harm and magnificence and love for your brothers. So there's a lot of love out there, a lot of love posted on Facebook. But in reality, all this love is set to the background of the system where everyone is compromised as educated slaves. They're still under the ruling thumb of the occultists, who believe they're doing the right thing, that the people, the sheeple, need their protection, and that we're all dumb and stupid, and they need us to, not need us, they need us for them to be what they're doing, because that's the way they were educated, to believe that they're shepherds and we are their sheep. Or they are the fishermen with the nets and we're the trapped fish in their nets, and that we need to be re-educated and entered into their domains of the correct way of life for a man. And this gets into the satanic religions and all the stuff that where the occult is all derived from. But so mediocrity is the basis of life in the system, and this tongue, this alphabet tongue, is mediocrity, talking to mediocrity across the mediocrity of the internet. It is all mediocrity. They are all prosthetics where we have given up the natural ability to communicate through the breath, because as we breathe out, we create water, and this mist is encoded in dreams that we hold, the intentions of life we live for. And through our senses, which has got nothing to do with what we imagine alphabet thoughts to be. This is where we sense, when you can smell a flower, when you can hear a bird sing. Our senses is our living consciousness. And when we sense the bird singing, we are there as the bird, experiencing it. And that's undefined. It's not defined, because when it's defined and the bird has been defined to us, then it's a pixelation of definition in our heads, where we are illuminating or projecting, illuminating the explanation given to us. Oh, that's a sparrow and sitting on that eucalypt tree, and on it goes, a conversation in the head. Now, all these definitions are just little pixelations of a shattered reality that we use to form the fake self, the fake persona, that we believe who we are under the name, because the definition is a name, because explanation is a name. So we live through the definition in observing what we sense of reality. Now, sensing is touch, taste, right? Feel, you can feel it, you can feel the wind, you can feel someone else, you can walk past a house and you can feel the vibe, whether it's happy or sad or miserable or very dark. You can hear it, you can see it. So those senses, touch, taste, feel, smell, hear, see, it's unique to each of us. No one can experience what you are experiencing in every instant through your senses. It will always be unique and original to you forever in this as the life of the man. The only way that we can be tricked is through the definitions that define what we're sensing, what we're experiencing. So we can all, hundreds of us could be standing together looking at a life form, like what we now call a yellow daffodil. And each of us is having a unique sensory experience through the contemplation, observation of that life form. If we try to explain and define that experience to someone else, that definition, that explanation is still not the experience we are actually having. And someone else who receives that explanation can only imagine it because they can't experience what you are sensing. So when we fall into the definitions of a life experience, we're actually falling into the fantasy of the matrix that is the basis of mediocrity. Because we're now imagining the definitions as being true. And when this has been done to us from the innocence of being in the womb of our mothers, who have already been defined into what a woman is, because they've been told what a woman is and how a woman should be, and that the father has been defined to what a man is. And this, we're talking libraries here. You imagine all the knowledge of this definitions are stacked in libraries, and these libraries are massive. It's like, 500 White Houses all sitting next to each other containing this defined knowledge. And that has to be filtered into our brains through the definitions that come out of education and suggestion and explanation, because we believe through our good heart we must define our children. But this is mediocrity, because we're teaching our children not to create dreams that they uniquely create through what they sense. So we are actually hijacking our children. And what actually is happening, the makers of the definitions are entering into the vessel of the life of the children that we have created. Because we can create the vessel, as in the body that comes out of the womb, but we can't create the soul for the vessel. Only the child can do that, the life. Each of us can only create the soul in the vessel. And that comes through our senses, not from the alphabets, because alphabets are definitions. The English alphabet is a definition that defines a perception of reality. Everyone lost in alphabets is lost in the matrix of definitions. We can only imagine this dreamscape, this dream world. And this is how we are separated from reality, because the more that we have been defined, and it's been practiced on it instant by instant, because we listen to mum and dad talking English or Latin or Italian or Greek, and we've been defined. Oh, Arthur, you're Greek. Arthur, you're a Leo. You're born, 21st of August, 57. Arthur, you're a 33, a 22 and 11, as people tell me in numerology, and on it goes. And we're breathing this out. And we're breathing this out. And it's encoded in the water, because all the water of life is come from man's breath. Because this is the medium of our creation, our ability to create dreams of life. Another way to explain this is that imagine, I'm going to give you a linear analogy, and I've used this before in other broadcasts, but I'll repeat it and go through another angle at looking at this. Imagine, or I should say, every dream has a creator. Life comes out of life. There's always a maker to the experience. And the only one that's present to the experience is man, because we're the only ones here. You cannot bring forward an experience without a man being a party or being associated to the experience. So whatever the experience is that's been communicated through the breath has come from man. Now, it's only man that's saying that there's aliens and ETs and there's gods and there's heavens and there's this and that and there's the stars and galaxies and universes and there's quantum physics and all that. But it's only man to that experience and it's only man calling out the definitions, because that man was defined into these definitions from so young. And that man is deeply confused, which is what everyone in the system is. Everyone's confused because no one knows who they really are from this. So what happens is this. I'll explain it to you in this way. Imagine the creator of the dream of life. We'll call it God. It just means magnificent man. God to me means magnificent man, means full responsibility. And there is magnificent man holding the living dream of life in its hand. Everything thought out for the creation of the dream of life is held in its hand in this bubble. Everything that's natural. So the wind and the rain and the cow and the birds and the insects and the creatures, everything that's an original, uncorrupted form is being held. But it's still just a dream, because dreams are thoughts, thoughts are dreams. It's still just a thought. And for the creator of this magnificent dream to set it into motion, to give it life, it had to enter into the bubble and breathe its life, breathe its breath into every thought that's being held in this magnificent dream, to set everything into motion to give it life. And that's exactly what happened, except that there never was a beginning to the bubble. There's never been a beginning to any of this. It's always been like this, without beginning or end. It's non-linear. But I'm just going to give you that linear analogy just so you can grasp this. So there's God, magnificent man, entered into the magnificent dream, standing as man on the land, amongst paradise, amongst its creation. And this magnificence is the essence of the Creator. It's the good heart of God. And everything of that dream is sacred and perfect. Everything unique and original. Everything and everything is unique and original. There's not one thing the same as the next. No leaf the same as the next leaf. No grain of sand the same as the next grain of sand. No fly the same as another fly. No man. All of us are unique and original too. But there's God standing there in paradise of its own making, of its own dreaming. And then it dreams for another man. And everything of the Creator, it's everything that was brought through its breath into the dream of life, that now is man, because there's God as man, is now created in its Son. And because there is no definitions there, there's no Medicare, there's no hospitals, there's no government, there's no schools, there's no religious leaders, there's no teachers, there's nothing. It's just nature. The child raised by nature learns naturally without learning, but it's just that the sacredness of nature is what the child is, because the magnificence of the Creator is now the magnificence of the child. And the body of the child is that magnificence, that's vessel. And so the senses of the child is in direct communion with everything. And in every instant, it's picking up sensory information of the Creator. But because it's the child is unique and original, it's experiencing in its unique way. And even God cannot impersonate what the child is creating. And because it's undefined, the child naturally reveres everything in its perfection and recognizes the magnificence of everything, because it's standing on these mountains and looking down over everything. And so the child also is a creator. Everything of God is given to the Son. And the Son can also hold a dream and breathe it out. And there's this bird flying from its hand and added to the magnificence. The child didn't take away from the magnificence. It added to the magnificence, because that's the inheritance, the legacy of its father. I'm talking lineal stuff here, right? It's not really father, mother, all that way, but it's... So, and the child grows, raised by animals, nature, not by God. Because for God to raise his own son, he would define it. And because God doesn't dream for its own children to be less than God, because God dreams for God's children to be greater than even God. because that was the good heart, undefined. And this is the inheritance, the legacy of every man's good heart we all have today, because we all came from man. Man created, man created, man created, man created man. Along the way, something happened. And confusion set in. And now we're dreaming mediocrity as magnificence. And we're running around in such confusion, believing that we're doing the right thing, when actually all we're doing is desecrating the sacredness of this living dream of life that we're all gifted with. And now we're coming to a time in this occultic panorama, this or cinerama, an end-time grand plan that was put in place in the fiction of time roughly 1,000 years ago, to bring about these circumstances that we're all arriving in today. And if we don't wake up, and I'm not claiming I'm the only vessel here of this insights, but there will be others. But again, I stress the point. We are being saturated by love coming from the good hearts of all our brothers and sisters, because that's still there. That essence is still there. But it's only set to the background of the system of mediocrity. So while we're calling out love to the mountain, we drive the car to the mountain to experience it. So the very love of the mountain that we love, we actually destroy by the car that we have to drive there. The very love we have that has to read novels is the very mountains and forests we're destroying to read these novels. Now, we are so compromised by this. There is nowhere in the system where this isn't happening. In every instant of your life in the system, this is happening. This mediocrity that's been revered as magnificence, which is actually desecration to the sacredness of this gifted dream of life that has been passed down through our great ancestors who pre the fallen state. Because everything you're experiencing of nature all around you was created by man. We are the only ones here. It was our ancestors who built, you can say, created the mountains, created the forests. And we're talking about everything being much bigger than what it is today. Because we're in the after effects of this shocking falling state into mediocrity, glorified as magnificence. Hence the pyramids and the obelisks and all the ancient stuff. This is all mediocrity. All of it dead, soulless. Because they're only imagining these things to be true. And this is why I don't want to attack occultists and all that stuff, because they think that this is true, but it isn't. It ain't true at all. It's just a fantasy. We have to go and destroy the original sacredness and build stone blocks and run slaves to build pyramids. And we have to, and then today it's no difference to white collars and blue collars that have to be kidnapped from the womb and be brainwashed to do these jobs that are not natural to children, because children brought up by nature would not learn about any of this stuff. You won't learn about ABC 1, 2, 3 and all the constructs and concepts that come out of alphabets. You won't learn about law, because the magnificence already built in you, the good heart that God gave to his son. Oh, it's not a he, because God is androgynous. But and I want to talk about this because I had this experience, but I don't want you to believe what I'm telling you about this, but these are the things that shaped why Love for Life started in 2005 and why the Love for Life website and all this work, and why this man is not veered away from any of this all this time since in this rental property, because it all happened while we've been living in this rental property. Well, it really took off in November 2005 when we moved into this rental property, which was only a couple of years old at that point, in East Barrel, Southern Highlands, in the system of fantasy in New South Wales, Australia. Anyway, so what I was saying earlier in the video, I'm going to come at this from different ways, and I'm confident that by the time this video is finished, I'll have given you a decent picture into how we've defined magnificence into mediocrity, and we call it magnificence. Because that's what a man is, a defined man is in the system. We are worse than Rambo. When we are defined man, we are far worse than Rambo, far worse than all the horrors of Pol Pot, Idi Amin. Each of us is brutal, ruthless, in spite of our good heart pulsating, in spite of the good heart pulsating all around us. We are driven and thrive on destruction. and harm, immense harm to brothers and sisters. We love it. We're worse than vampires, sucking off the life of brothers and sisters, because that's what the system is. It is vampirical. Definitions are not natural to us. They are there to mask what we are experiencing of life, because what the definition does, and this is why you're educated and why you're brought into the education system, is to get you to kidnap the vessel and enter it into the system, which is another dream, where all the definitions play out as the dream of life. So instead of the original dream of God, the original man, who gifted us nature, and that for each child to be raised by nature, that would then carry on the legacy of that magnificence and pass it on even better to the next child, and the next one, and the next one, through the descendants. It got switched through suggestions put in another man's head by a man, saying that that's a daffodil and that's yellow, and that's this and that. And the receiver going, wow, that's really cool, I like that, and starts imagining it. And the more it's imagining, it's directing the current of its life energy into the pictures, which is forming the shapes through the water of its breath. And if that man is deceived into accepting these pictures and wants to create the physical material image of these definitions, it only has reality, the sacredness of reality around, to go to and take from it, which means you've got to hum insects, bacteria, molecules, you name it, trees, forests, animals, creatures. We have to alter it, disfigure it, to form these alien shapes. This has evolved into cities today and suburbs. And with all its magnificence of mediocrity that we call the progress of civilization, with its engineering of the Taj Mahal and the Sydney Harbour Bridge and the Snowy Mountains River scheme and the Great Wall of China and all this, because all of this is a man resisting the good heart. We are resisting the good heart. We are confused because we've learned to distrust our brothers and sisters around us because it was educated into us through these definitions. So when you have a child infected by definitions, and they get lost in the imagining, it's very easy for the child to rise up from the dead, rise up from fantasy. For instance, it would run into the wardrobe, wear clothing to make it look like it's Alice in Wonderland, run around being Alice in Wonderland or Superman or a lawyer or a barrister, or anything, any image title, any image label that's in the system, and believe it to be true when it ain't at all. It's just a lie, a magnificent lie by confused men and women, brothers and sisters, all with good hearts, who want to actually do immense harm but take no responsibility for it, because that's what mediocrity is all about. Just destroy everything around you and don't care. Fuck it. Get back in the car, throw that out the window, go to the petrol station, go to the Bowser, fill it up with more shit. And the supply line of all the educated slaves everywhere feeds this mediocrity. All the time we're dreaming for love and oneness and unity. And somehow we think that living in the system, we're going to bring us all together in some kind of wholeness. It won't happen. Because unless each child creates the soul, the unique soul, which is undefined man, there won't be this sacredness. So going back to the original dream, there's God holding the living dream of life. It means full responsibility for the magnificence. But it's undefined. It's already said without having to say it. And the good heart already consciously tells the child that God created. Man that created man, the created man. Do no harm. Instead, be inspired. Make it even more beautiful. Add to it. Expand the magnificence of undefined man's creation. And that's all of nature around us, what remains. What you're seeing with your eyes. Our ancestors were over 30 foot tall. Everything was much bigger. We're living in the lies of mediocrity now because there are people who wrote about all the history that have lied to you about this history. Because, and I'll give you a quick window into this before I move on to the bigger picture of why I've made this video today. But as I said before, definitions form the fantasies of perceived realities. A definition can only be imagined and believed to be true when it's just a thought in your head that you have not created. It's just a dream put in your head by another man. And because you've not been provided with full disclosure, and that sacredness of your vessel has not been protected, we have been infiltrated. It's like, imagine a wall that's holding back water, there's a little hole in it, and the leaking coming through, each one being a definition. And gradually the pressure and the wearing the hole opens up until through the generations of this deception, the whole wall collapsed and we got flooded, which is what we got today in a world, a dream world of definitions where no one has dreams that are unique to each man. Every man has been defined and been deceived through confusion because they've still got a good heart there and they're feeling it. And so they believe I'm an engineer and I'm going to construct this bridge, and I'm going to be part of a workforce of other brilliant engineers and intellectuals that will deliver from that mountain range to this river the bridge. And no one will look at the devastation that we're causing all this while. We didn't need the bridge and we didn't need to harm the mountain. But because the mediocrity glorified, we will glorify this. And then that father will take his children and comes and look what I built. Look at this. And the child grows up and it becomes a scientist working for NASA, building rocket ships, sailing them to bust through the fantasy, thinking that the moon exists as a planet and that there's planets out there and we're going to search out there. But none of this happens, guys. There's nothing out there in that way. It's a fantasy, true fantasy. And you've been lied to extensively about this deception. What you see with your eyes is true, but everything explained about what you see is not true at all. None of it, because you're only imagining it. So the child that falls into the story of Alice in Wonderland can easily run around and be Alice in Wonderland, or the child that falls into the story of Superman can run around and be Superman. We've risen up through our breath, the costume of Superman, and there's our child running around as Superman, set to the backgrounds of Metropolis and everything else that goes on with the bad guys and the good guys and all the stories that plays out for Superman. Now, this is confusion because this child is seriously confused. We've actually trained our children to be confused. And we sit there with me and go, oh, look at our children playing Superman, running around, and we're all laughing and smiling. I mean, I've done this too. This is how we grow up and become murderers, immense harm doers, ugly, ugly monsters, disgraceful stuff. We'll be walking around in their supermarkets with our children, loving our children. We've got to buy all the crap from the shop, take it home. We've got to pay for the bills that come in the mail, the water, the electricity. And all this is defined mediocrity, because this is what we revere now. We revere the desecration of man through slavery and inculcation, where we built a world of absolute destruction to the living dream, which is now on its knees of our doing, because we're the only ones that can destroy it. There's no one else that can destroy it. Don't blame it on Satan and fallen angels, because it's only man-made. It's only man to the experience. We're the only ones here. You know, I always said to people, bring forward an experience without man being a party to that experience. Think that out. Bring forward any experience without a man being associated to that experience. You can't. No one can. Because every experience, which is including thoughts that you dream, what you experience through your senses, is man-made. It's always man-made. The only confusion are the definitions that built up storytelling scripts or mythologies and myths of things of the past and ancient time, but all that was man-made too. And all the stories of alien invasion, all that's all man-made too. And all the stories of astrology and astronomy and all that is man-made too. We actually create what we dream, the dreams that we hold, just as God held the living dream of life and came in, and there's God holding the dream of life and living the dream that it created, because it's holding it, being it, living it, it's present. We're being present to the lie and living it, believing it true, because all we can do is imagine it. Yes, Jesus existed, God existed, this happened, but you weren't there. Just because man dreamt the dream, and you can feel man's consciousness or life in these dreams of Jesus and God, because that's what we feel. When you walk past the house and you're experiencing really bad vibes there, it's man who created that bad vibe, and it's a man who's experienced the bad vibe as you're walking past the house. So when you're reading books, you're reading from the experience of man who put that images in your head, but you are the man reading the book, experiencing whatever it is that's coming from that story of the book by the writer who wrote it. You see, we are all at the effect of each other. We're creating everything. There's no one else, because we are it. We are the children of God, but not less than God. We're supposed to be, because we're undefined, we're supposed to be more magnificent, because we're supposed to be adding to this magnificence, not destroying it, wrecking it, which we do by ignoring man's good heart and the pressure that's put on all of us, which I'm going to talk about as one part of this video. See, the truth is, there's no leaders or followers. There's no cults or sects. This man doesn't come to you to be your leader, or to say, hey, wait, notice Arthur, wow, look at these insights. It's not about that. I'm saying, are you listening? Are you actually slowing down this defined conversation you had and making sense of what this man felt, and why this man is consistently putting out videos every now and then, and putting particles and posts of these insights? Can you see past this confusion? Can you connect with a dream that you have actually created, where you have your soul? Because if you don't, and once your vessel's gone, you have no soul. It'll just be an apparition, a thought form. And while the name still resides, because the birth certificate of the name of that vessel is now given a plaque or a tombstone, or through the crematorium put in a box, while that name still has a photo on the wall in someone's house, but through their generation, that name will be forgotten. And when that name is forgotten, the apparition is also faded away too and gone, because that apparition can't enter or incarnate as a life, because there's no consciousness there. It was a fantasy. Because a fantasy does not create life. A fantasy will not lead you to reality. It only keeps you lost in fantasy. So if all you know are just definitions in your head, you're gone. You're gone. So if you don't wake up and create living dreams through your senses, which has nothing to do with the alphabets in your head, not a single alphabet thought. Have you ever stopped and just quietly just listen? Can you actually hold a dream through your senses, through smell, through sight, looking at things, and sense a dream with not an alphabet thought in your head defining it? Because if you can do that, you've broken the spell. All you have to do then is expand on that. Expand it. And that's been this healing work that this man's been doing here and helping many other people how to reclaim, well, not reclaim, create a soul. Because that's why they come here, because they come lost, confused, as this man was. So it's not about making money out of people. This is not about, who's got the best piece of land and all this stuff, because we're talking about going to something much more magnificent, all of this. Because we've got to be the wind under each other's wings and raise each other up, back with this magnificence. But to do that, we have to let go of everything of the system. Because we can't bring the system with us. Those definitions, it's my land, my exclusivity, my privilege, this is my law degree, this is my titles. You bring this stuff with you, you're bringing fucking hell with you to destroy everyone around you, because it's all you can do. The definitions that formed your fake life as a lawyer, judge, barrister, politician is worse than nuclear weapons. This is worse than all the nuclear bombs in the world brought together. Just to open your mouth and define an innocent child with that, you're destroying them. The living essence of creation, you're fucking killing them. It's murder. It's true murder. This is the reality of it. Just think about it. In the glory of the system of this defined magnificence, which is really just mediocrity disguised as magnificence, we have generation of generation, brilliant intellectuals, great academics, philosophers, glorified from ancient Greece with Plato, all the amazing engineers of ancient Greeks with their mathematics that did amazing feats, because they actually built Egypt. It was the Greeks that built Egypt, not the Greeks of today. But if anyone goes back to the early work, you'll see what I'm talking about. But all these brilliant intellectuals, all these intellectuals that went to Eton, Yale, Cambridge, all the elite places, all this money behind the Roman Catholic Church, the Jesuits, the Church of England, all the institutions, all this stuff. All the brilliant intellectuals coming out of every university today that we send to school, qualified in all areas of the system, science, engineering, mathematics, geometry, you name it, quantum physics. Amazing. We've got incredible resources of brilliance of intellectuals. Look at the fucking world we're in today. Look at this mess. Because collectively, this is what we got from all these people and from all of us who've accepted it. Because the definitions are destroying magnificence. But we're glorifying the definitions. And so we've raised from the dead, like the child raising Superman by wearing the costume, running around as Superman, because it's a figment of its imagination. We're running around and calling it Sydney. The Sydney Harbour Bridge. And the suburbs of Sydney, and all the suburbs. We're raising up this fucking nightmare. And all the supply lines to feed Sydney, all the transport, and the petroleum. And if you want to call it free energy, well, we're going to fix it. It's not, because even the windmills we put up kills millions and millions of bats and birds every bloody year. Every one of them. And if you call about solar panels, that's not free. Because there's millions of Chinese dying because of people having these solar panels. And it's devastation to the sacredness of man's dream of life. That's not free energy. That's not free. That's just magnificence defined into mediocrity. Ignore it. I want my free energy. I'm alternative. I'm echo. I'm being responsible. Bullshit. You're just an educated slave in a drone system amongst drones, destroying everything. Under the think that, oh my good heart, I'm doing the right thing. I'm being alternative. You're not being alternative. Nothing's changed. It's just a sigh-up between your ears if you think that that's changed. You still don't know who you are. The confusion reigns supreme. Just stop and think it out. Look it out. Look out the window. You could have millions of us today all come together, all wanting to love. But if we keep going home to the system, if we keep going home to the internet, keep going home to technology, we're still that rolling stone out of control, heading towards annihilation of this magnificent dream that God created for all of us. Because a God exists. There is a God. But it's undefined. And it has nothing to do with individualism or individualism. Got nothing to do about any of that, because there is no self. There is no pixelation going on in the dream of life, because we're not separated from the wholeness. We're all supposed to be the expressions of this wholeness, of this dream of life, already being unique and original. We don't need a name, and we don't need to own anything, because we already are all that. Like we're running around wanting freedom when we already got it. We're running around worrying about this and that when we've already got air to breathe every moment. We're not having to jump 40 feet down, 10 feet there to get each breath. We already got it. It's there. The sun's still shining. Everything of the truth is still present to us, because if it wasn't, we'd be dead. It hasn't abandoned us. We are abandoning it by these lies in our head, these definitions spinning. The definitions, as I said before, when we define a child, we're turning them into the greatest monster you could possibly imagine. Someone who loves destruction, but sees it as magnificence. And this includes all the sexual orientation going on, social engineering, defining a man into gender and race, culture, creed. All of it's the same shit. Because what's happened now, the definitions that are figments of our imagination, each alphabet, I'm going to explain this to you. When we define an innocent child, each letter is a pixelation, which is basically a shattering, a removing from the wholeness of the dream of life. But because the child is not aware this is happening to it, and the parents aren't aware that they're doing it to their children, and the parents who leave their child with others who are doing it, the pixelation evolves, just like when you have a computer monitor and it's filled with heaps of pixelations to form this image. Each letter combined forms words, and the words form sentences and paragraphs and chapters, become books and storytelling, and we're forming bigger pictures of a separation from reality, because these are not our dreams. As children growing up in nature, we did not create these dreams. They're implanted into us. And because we're sensing reality around us with that good heart, we think, oh, these are our dreams. This is it. This is as good as it is. We're on the right track. When we're not at all. That's why I say the greatest lie and lie is the one closest to the truth. They cause the greatest damage of all, because the dupe learned to trust the lie. Learn to trust the liar, believing it to be true. And those liars are mums and dads, us, defining our children, because we keep sending them to school. We think we have to do it. But the chaos was there before the children arrived. It was the war against man that was there before any child arrived to be sent to the war, which is school. They're going to the war zone as school, because that's what happens. You can remember these people. They came as Freemasons, signers, botanists, surveyors, right? Amongst all the tribes of men all across Earth, who didn't have any of this shit going on. They didn't know alphabets. They just had their dreams and what you call on the word customs that came from these dreams, which is their songs and tribal dances and things they'd done. Right? So these Freemasons came and mapped everything. They documented everything, the landscapes, the environments, everything. How they dressed, how to get there, where the rivers are, everything. Once they mapped everything, because they came as botanists, surveyors, geologists, priests, many of them on these ships. And when they mapped everything, they finished it, they then worked on ways to destroy these tribes. And we are all the descendants of these broken down tribes that have this, because this has happened all across Earth. And this history is written by these people because they're the only ones that could record alphabets. So roughly 1780 AD, 99.99% of all of man could not read and write anything. Didn't know what a definition was. And even up to 1930 AD, still more than 90% of men were illiterate. So we're talking inside a small little window here of not even 250 years of capitulation into annihilation of this whole living dream. And as each day went past from roughly 1780 AD, because that's when they decided to enforce English on every child, that the English will become the new world language, because they actually started creating English back in the 10th century. And they called it the New World Language. It was a one world tongue made up of definitions, and the communication of oneness and love and all these things that would bring us all together unified off the back of all this chaos that has been engineered was the plan to bring in this new world order, a one world system. But it isn't. It's just defined man branded as an educated slave, but loving their slavery, revering their slavery. And that's because of the contrast of hell that they've all come from, and the stories they'll pass on to their children, that we must never go back to this nightmare that we're all living in today. And so that deception is played out as well. So everything in your head that's defined to you is no different to a child that has the script of Superman in his head that needs to play the role of Superman. All the history form the foundations of the lie we live today that celebrates the progress of civilization and the progress of annihilation to this living dream of life, because it is spiritual suicide. It is suicide to the very fabric of what we are, where we all came from, the true heritage gifted to us by God, meaning original man, undefined man, our great ancestors. And out of all of this madness, our ancestors destroyed so much, our fallen state ancestors. And that's why you see a lot of these works. I'll just touch on these things. The Atlantic Ocean, the Indian Ocean, all the oceans, the Mediterranean Sea, none of these things existed up until roughly about 1100 years ago of sunrise, sunsets. Because they burst the firmament, and all that water came down. And all the water came out from the earth, because it's all part of the dream of life that holds everything. And all our ancestors used to live in the lowland, where the oxygen was richer and more intense. And the pollen was more rich and more intense. So everything was far bigger than what we are today. So we're on the higher lands now, where the oxygen is much thinner, and we're destroying it with all that pollution and all the mechanical transports we use, and all the frequencies and microwaves and all the HARP and chemtrails, all the stuff that's going on, is to maintain this confusion. You see, when the Creator created the dream of life, and there's God, the light, that sun, was the spirit, the intention of the Creator bringing light to the dream that it held. So the sun moving across earth was the dream of God bringing light, life into the dream that it held. And so we'd have rest, and we called that evening. Well, it wasn't called evening, and it was a pink light, a soft pink light of many colors, actually. It was like the aurora borealis everywhere in the midst of this breath. And as man created man, original man, every man is breathing out this gift of creation. Just as God breathed into the bubble, man's breathing into the dream of life too. We're adding, and so earth is expanding, creation is expanding. And each man came and remembered what the man was. There was a star shining as its light, its soul, over the dream of life that it held. Every star is the soul of man. The clusters are thus the tribes and families of man. There is no galaxies up there, guys. It's all bullshit. The comets that you see, or the shooting stars, are souls coming into life from the stars, if you want to call it that. And the souls that are leaving. Not leaving as in we're going away to some other world. They're still here. So when you look at the big picture of the dream of life, you could say that all the stars are hung on earth, and our ancestors could reach and touch them, literally. because they're souls of their ancestors. So there's no light years. There's no hundreds of thousands of years in that way. All the cosmology you've been taught is all crap. All the definitions within definitions within definitions within definitions. It's just a child lost in the multi-books of Harry Potter. We call them scientists and running around with quantum physics today, coming from the background of early science, all this stuff. It's all defined, and everyone is lost, because when you're lost in definitions, you are truly confused and gone. You don't know who you are anymore. But because you have that good heart, you keep directing the current into the dream of fantasy and keep running with the fantasy to destroy everything. And this is the thing that of what this video is about, is that we were all meant to be magnificent in everything that we do, which means do no harm. We're not meant to alter and desecrate reality. We're meant to leave it sacred, untouched. We all walk very lightly on the ground. And we probably originally were breatharians. I would say that originally God arriving as man in the lineal picture, and there's God standing there in paradise, it was a breatharian. It didn't come already eating an apple. It didn't have a bunch of carrots in its hand when it was right there going, I like my creation. It probably was just present. And this magnificence is critical to get your head around, because I've used this many times, these lineal analogies, and there's another one I'm going to use here. And it's just man. I call it Little Mary. And Little Mary is a man. We can sense Little Mary. We can touch, taste, feel, smell Little Mary. Little Mary is present with the presence of life. We don't need anyone to tell us that Mary exists, because she's already present. Mary doesn't need a name for us to know that Mary exists. So we don't need a definition about anything to do with Mary. Now, but in the system, Little Mary's brought up and she gets brainwashed into stories like Alice in Wonderland. Now she's now in the scripts, spinning in her head these definitions of Alice in Wonderland. But it's only Little Mary performing Alice in Wonderland, or Little Johnny performing Superman. Now Superman or Alice are not present with the presence of life. They are not amongst the living. We cannot sense them. They're not here. We're only imagining that they're here. But they're not here, and never will be, because they don't exist. That's the same as ABC 1, 2, 3. They're not here. You can only imagine them. There's no soul of the creator in it, no life. Where we can go to the cow and experience the life, its purpose, directly from the cow, we can't go to Alice in Wonderland to experience it from Alice directly. We can only go to Little Mary, who's lost in the story. So if Little Mary believes Alice exists, Little Mary is very confused. And if we send our children Little Mary to learn from Little Mary, we're going to make our children more confused than Little Mary. And through the generations, we're going to end up with one hell of a fucking mess. Right? So the point is, Alice and Wonderland will never ever be present with the presence of life, with the presence of life. The whole of the system is this. Every single alphabet thought in your head does not exist. Every single definition in your head, no matter what it is you think, is a lie. And that lie can only destroy the original magnificence of what you were gifted with. And if you are destroying the fabric of who you really are, passed down from your great ancestors, then you can only destroy it. And in destroying it, you can destroy everything. Until there's nothing to remind you. We'll produce a generation who'll have nothing. And that's it, all over in that way, for those who fall into this. No child can go anywhere in nature to learn about ABC 1, 2, 3. No one can go to nature and learn about science or astrology or mathematics or anything. There is not a single definition that a child can learn from nature, because nature is sacred. It only offers magnificence undefined. And all of creation is undefined. When the child observes the undefined tree, it sees every leaf as unique and original, never to experience one leaf to be the same as the next. Same with every insect. And if the child wants to use its consciousness and go even deeper into the soil, it can go down and visit all the microbes through its breath, because there's no separation. The whole of the dream of life and the mountains and everything, the child has this ability, natural ability, as God did, to penetrate everything naturally and to revere that sacredness. And this is like putting a child into a sandpit and giving it toys in the sandpit. Here, build your life. Except this case, this is undefined. It's not a sandpit, it's nature. God gave earth to man to carry on this magnificent dream. We have to wreck it and call it magnificence. And we say this is as good as it's going to be. So that'll give you a bit of a picture. For those of you who may still be confused about any of these things, I will have in the About section of this video and in the YouTube video links to Facebook chats, particularly the image labels and a few others, and links to many YouTube videos which go into these themes, specifically these sort of themes. So you can expand on that if you dream to. What drives me to make this video today, from sharing some of this background, is that there was a series of events that happened for this man, unique and original to this man, not for anyone else to be under this man because of it. But I'm going to share them with you because what Fiona and this man are doing with this garden, and why this garden exists, and why the Love for Life work has been in this rental property all this time, needs to be shared, and from a bigger picture, because we've got to see the bigger picture. Because if we don't get the bigger picture, we cannot access the magnificence. And this is again the pixelations I was talking about earlier, about when you define children, these little pixelations, they fall into the scripts, and when the definitions lock in with other definitions and forms the alphabet tongue, that is the dictionary, the thesaurus, and it becomes the storytelling of your life in the system, you're completely gone. Because even the name you were given is not who you are. And all the identification that comes with it, and all that's all fake, because it's all fantasy. And while we're lost in fantasy, we are unconscious of the bigger picture. And if we can't hold that bigger picture, just as God can hold the big picture in present sense, always present with the presence of life. It's what we're supposed to be, present with the presence of life, always. If God can't hold that as man, because that's what we are, then we will fall away. We will peel away. We will fragment. You know, it's like we're chiseling it away, or it's just fragmenting. And all we have left is the pixelations of fantasy in our heads spinning as that matrix. And because mum and dad are doing it, and everyone else around us are doing it, we go to school, everyone else around and we think, oh, this is it, this is normal. And we don't even question it. So that image label thread gets into a lot of these things, especially these things about pixelations and all that. Anyway, this man was brought up in the system, in the fictions of time, was sexually abused between the ages of 1.5 and 4.5, possibly 5, by my mother leaving this body, this vessel, with another woman who was involved, connected to the Greek church out at Maroubra. This is in Sydney. Now what I'm going to share with you, I had no idea about any of this stuff. I had always been very troubled. I grew up very troubled. I carried with me an ocean of disturbances, but I didn't know what it was because of this separation, the head spinning with definitions and the vessel running with all the trauma and no connection between the two. And that's what happens to everyone in the system. This is break, this fracture. And we call it split personalities, multiple personality disorders. We all got it. You cannot be in the system without this going on. Because the emotions, or the emotions, motions, are the intentions. It's that light from other men and women who want to control your vessel. Because that's what definitions are. The purpose of a definition is to get you to live dreams that others put in your head, so you will follow those dreams, right? Just like a robot. If you want to build a robot to carry out specific intentions for it that will deliver you a certain outcome, you've got to manufacture the robot, because that's your spirit, your intention in the robot. But then you've got to give it the program to turn it on, so it will deliver to you the outcome that you intended for it. And that's why the occultists get at us in the womb, cradle all the way to the grave, because they only want us to know what we're holding as the dream, because it was done to them too. And if that's all you know, you're not even here. You don't even know who you are. You'll imagine you're conscious, but the definition of your consciousness is not your consciousness. So if I define what consciousness is to you, that's still not your consciousness. Just like I said, if I define to you, oh, that daffodil's yellow, that yellow and the daffodil is still not the experience you're having with that life form you're observing. So no matter what I describe to you about any experience will only be a lie by defining it. The truth is, I should allow you to have the freedom to go to the experience of that and your unique way experience it, without anything coming from me into your head, telling you anything about it. So in that same way, when we define children, we are removing their ability to be the captain of their vessel. And we're allowing occultists to come in as the captain of the vessel, which is that software program running the robot. And even though all of us have got a good heart, we are confused about who's in control of this vessel. And when we wake up and go to bed living in this matrix dream, believing we're doing the right thing, even though many of us feel things aren't right, but we can't seem to dot the I and cross the T's as to what's actually happened to us. And in these other videos, we get into this too, and particularly the ritual sacrifice with the emotions. You can get into all that and get your head around that stuff if you wish to, ever. Anyway, the vessel of this man was abused because doing this love life work here, I allowed myself to access these traumas in my body, and the information of those traumas started coming as those pictures in this man that you could, like watching a movie. I was able to watch the movie of the intentions of those that were doing the harm on the vessel from this little kid. And I'm talking about anal penetration from 1.5 to 4.5. My mother and father didn't do it. I'm not saying that the relatives on either side of my mother and father close to me had been involved, but I know that something on one side of my family, somewhere further bit out, maybe uncles, cousins, not sure. They were connected into these Freemasonic stuff through the Greek church at Maroubra, had done it. Because I saw myself in a room with these 5 Greek people doing this to me, and 2 of them were women. And I don't know why they do it, and I'm not going to go explaining all that in this video. Maybe that can be talked about, and I'm pretty sure I may have covered it in other videos and articles, because it's all about breaking your will. Because that's what all the occult's all about. If you can accept another dream in your head that was made by someone else, your will is broken, because you're not allowed to create dreams uniquely to you. You've been thwarted. And if it's done very subtly and you don't notice this, and then it's gradually built up, through, early life, now these days, iPods and computers and that, and then daycare, preschool, kindergarten, first class, second class, third class, high school, deep certified brainwashing when you come out with these certificates as an engineer from university. This is sinister, this stuff. It's so sinister, it's unbelievable how we do it. And all the trauma that has affected all of us, and all the physical sicknesses and disorders has come from this stuff. And if we learn to let it go, then we don't need to see chiropractors and osteopaths and doctors. We don't need any of it, because we can restore wholeness back. But we don't know how to access this stuff and let it go. So anyway, doing the love life work, along the way, I was accessing this stuff, and I could see it. Being emotionally detached from it, I could see what was happening to this vessel. And I'm sitting there, and then later my body starts crying and going, God, now I know what happened. And that came out of hundreds of letters we received. We got, from the floor up, you could stack up, and a couple of feet high letters we got from people who sharing stories about their sexual abuse and pedophilia and all this sort of stuff. We never went looking for any of this stuff in Love for Life when we started Love for Life. It was always about the issues about Macquarie Bank and what happened to us. And this is what I want to talk about, to show how this magnificence defined in mediocrity really works. Because we think this is magnificence under the guise of, sorry, it's the other way around. It's actually mediocrity under the guise of magnificence. And we said, you got to live with it. You got to take it. This is free enterprise. It's capitalism. It's dog eat dog. You got to do the best you can. And if you can't, well, it's too bad. It's the way it is. We're going to have class systems. We're going to have rich and poor, and there's going to be carnage, and the courts are going to be full with people every day, going to the Supreme Court, high courts, going to the local courts and the federal courts, and all the different levels of the courts. It's just going to be packed, full of very broken down men and women, don't even know who they are, being used and abused by this whole process because no one knows who they are. They don't have living dreams of magnificence because that responsibility has been forsaken. They don't know what full responsibility is anymore. They're giving it up. They're under limited responsibility. And limited responsibility means you don't know what magnificence is. And if you don't know what magnificence is, you don't even know who you are, what you are. So you're used and abused, raped, pillaged, and plundered. You're basically educated cattle, prodded and pushed along the gravy train from one to the next, in lines to bank tellers and in lines to the football. And it's just unbelievable, man, this stuff. So that was a profound experience. Going back to roughly, it was early 2006, in the fictions of time, we moved here into this place November 2005. I'm going to share this chain of events and lead it all to what this all means today. Now, this man had already experienced about 2 years to 3 years of dealings with the Australian Taxation Office over $250,000, which was shown to be a huge lie, that this debt was owed. And it led to bringing this family out to here from Sydney. I had years before all this, I had separated the family home, gift that to Fiona, and all the business was left to me. I wanted to keep all that separate, and I did that some years earlier. And I'd already was reaching that point of 19 years or so of dealing in business, and I made many mistakes along the way. I nearly lost my mother's home along the way too, through stupidity, absolute stupidity. Not a malevolent intent, it was just a byproduct of ego and fantasy. And so I've had a lot of experiences that have really led me into seeing things of the system. So my business life and my earlier life and all that sort of stuff is maybe what I am today. But anyway, November 2005, we moved here, and I was doing these 2-hour walks, and the residues of that whole Australian Taxation Office it was falling away. I was getting phone calls and visits from federal police coming here to this house from November through to the early stages of, I think even mid-2006, about the fact that they wanted, I was receiving letters from the government departments that wanted this man to sign off bankruptcy of this man. Because I'd given the business away to one of my staff, and I just wanted to walk away from all that side of stuff. And it was while this was going on that we discovered this fraud with Macquarie Bank as well, to do with the family home, which I had no idea that had been done. And now I can look back and realize all this is connected. It's cunning how this stuff works, but you don't see the behind the scenes how all this works. Anyway, I'm doing these 2-hour walks, and this is like late January 2006. I'm walking nearby on this road called Old South Road, and I go around and I end up doing this 2-hour walk, and I'm walking very fast to keep my head clean and fear. And I mean, I'm ready to deal with all the shit that I was dealing with back then. And a memory came back to me. I'm like 20 minutes into the walk, and a thought would come back to me of an experience that I had back in 1979 down in the snowy mountains when I got to meet Bill Mollison and all the people involved in permaculture, and I was living connected with an American guy who brought a lot of money to this region and built a community and was building all these different projects. And I got to see all the things that were working and not working, and it was a great experience. But one night, in this remote location on my own, living in this house, I got woken up by this presence, this androgynous being in the bedroom, looking over me with a golden yellow and a white light that I can't paint. It was, the golden, the yellow, and the white was so perfect. And the eyes were all the colors of life in wholeness. Everything was wholeness. It didn't ask anything from me, didn't tell me how to do anything. There was no voices, no alphabet voices heard. It was just this presence. And it was androgynous. It wasn't male or female. And the feeling that I was experiencing is something like what people experience in near-death experiences, this incredible true piece of love and peace. And it was like the heart of God revealed to me in that moment. And it was timeless, because when this experience happened, I don't know how long it went on for. It was just timeless. And then it went. And I remember hearing the dogs barking outside. And I had to get up, tell the dogs quieten down, and go back to bed. And then ever since 1979, up until this walk, I used to garnish this experience. What was it? Because my head spinning, aliens, ETs, what, I had no idea. It was a magnificent experience. But as I got older and older, and especially as I was heading towards the love for lifetime, I stopped thinking about it. I wasn't, I didn't think it was important in that way. So on these 2-hour walks, that thought came back in my head during the day. And I said to myself, well, what was it? Well, I'm walking fast with my older border collie dog, Sammy, who's no longer with us. Well, he's still here, but he's not in the body. And the moment I thought this, a voice spoke to me for everything that exists. And it hit me. It was like 4 MMA fighters punching me in my gut, around my belly button, with their ferocity. But there was no pain. My whole body just completely physically buckled over. I was physically buckled over by this voice. It said to me it was the face of God. And my whole body just burst into a state of elation. Not dreamt for. I didn't premeditate this. And elation just poured out of my eyes of joy. My whole skin was just with tears pouring out all over my body. There was this white and yellow light again that I saw, in gold all around, and really big. And in that voice, everything was it. But I still didn't comprehend this. I didn't get what, okay. And it took me a while, because when I buckled over, I had no breath. All the breath was taken out of me, completely out of me, and I was in flux. At some point, I had to breathe in, otherwise this vessel would have gone, would have died. But it was in such a blissful state, an uncontrived, undefined state. And then again, it's timeless. This was a timeless experience, as it happened with that face back in 79. In that remote location. When I pulled myself together after whatever it happened, and I'm going to stress the point, it spoke through the ground. It spoke through every cell in my body. It spoke through every leaf around me. There was nowhere, even whatever I was seeing in the distance, it was there too, this voice. When I pulled myself together, I went home. I stopped the 2-hour walk, went home to Fiona, who was home. We had younger kids then. And I said to her, "You're not going to believe this. I think I'm going mad. I'm going crazy." And we talked about it. We sat down and I said, "What do you do with this?" And I says, "Well, I don't know. We're not going to write a book about God talking to me," because I knew about that stuff. I already hated it, tongue down the back of my throat about all this sort of stuff. And so we invented an imaginary bookshelf. And I said, let's file it up there as a reference point, and let's move on. Let's let it go. We'll leave it there to keep recalling, which I must have been done with the face one back in 79. Now, some period went past, could have been late February, early March, probably late February. Same walk along this 1 kilometre stretch of Old South Road. Somewhere along there, 20 minutes or so into the walk, bang, a man shifted his whole body in front of me while I'm walking. And he was what we call an Aboriginal man. And I'm sitting there stunned as I'm walking. It's all happening. And he says to me, I've been waiting for you for thousands of years. And I'm sitting there going, what? And there's this white light, gold and yellow all over. That feeling of peace and love and timelessness, the tears, the elation, the joy, and the rhythms and the melodies around this man. And I knew he was a man on the land. He was like us, alive, living as man on the land, and still here now, somewhere on this land. We call Guyana land or Australia, whatever you want to call it. Still alive. He didn't tell me what I had to do. Nothing. I sensed the words or the sound. I wasn't hearing it from his outside. It was like as if he was inside my head talking to me. And in that timelessness, I don't know whether it went on for some minutes or whatever, or seconds. I have no idea. He then went. And when I pulled myself together again, because it was really, just like being punched in that belly button physically, it's a physical bang, like it's going, wow, and not grasping it all yet. I got out of that state and went home to Fiona again. I stopped the 2-hour walk. And I said, I think I'm going crazy. I'm sitting there talking. I said, what do we talk about this. What does it mean? What do you do with this? And again, up on the bookshelf, move on. Weeks went past. I'm now into late March or something like that. Could have been April, early April, 2006. Similar walk. Bang! An American Indian appears before me. He's 6'3", 4", whatever. The best looking man I've ever seen in my life. And I'm not talking Cary Grant Hollywood stuff. I'm talking about a beautiful man with his feathers and everything. And he says to me, while I'm walking, I've been waiting for you for thousands of years. And he told me his name was Running Water. And going back to the previous experience, the other man told me his name, which was Guga Dunga something. And it just went a long, long name. I just call him Guga Dunga because it's the only thing I can sort of grasp. It was too big for me. But this man revealed himself as Running Water and said that he was my spirit man, meaning what people would call a spirit guide or someone who works with us, like an ancestor. And again, all the rhythms and the melodies around this man. And as it was with Gugadunga. And the elation, the white light, the blue light, the tears, the elation, the physical effect. It was like, it's a true physical experience, not just something you're just imagining in your head. It was a true sensory experience. And didn't ask anything from me, didn't tell me I had to do anything, just like Gugadunga and the face and the sound and the voice and all that of whatever you call God. And then when that effect ended, and I must press the point, the dog is looking at them too. In fact, I think one time the dog sat down and looked at them like this, going like that, So it was there. And I knew that Running Water was not a man on the land. What you would call what others would call on the other side, if you want, but there's no other side really. And you'll get to see what I'm talking about. I went home to Fiona and talked about this timelessness and all these amazing, everyone should have these experiences really. This is not something that's, exclusive to this man. It's just what happened for me. Probably from the dreams I held when I was a young kid and dreaming for these things, dreaming for truth, Anyway, then from there, Fiona and I, we talked about it. Oh, what do we do with this? Again, something right up on the shoe shelf, on the bookshelf. Leave it as a reference point. Move on. Don't live your life out of that. And all this time, all the early stages of Macquarie Bank was already happening. We discovered these frauds, because we only, when we moved here, it was only like within days or weeks of being here that we discovered the switching in contracts and all this stuff going down, this really nasty stuff. This was what I started to fight while I'm going for these 2-hour walks. Weeks went past, and it was May. I know this was May because between January and May, all these things happened. This was the last of these experiences. During May, I'm doing these 2-hour walks during the day, 20 minutes or so into the walk along Alsaf Road. Bang, both Running Water and Gugadung appear together. And I'm looking and I'm swearing off my head. I'm going, fuck, this is impossible. How the fuck can this be happening? He's a man on the land. He's a spirit man. There's no separation between. And I'm looking at them both while I'm walking and going, bullshit, and I'm absolutely losing it in my head. Going, this is just, spinning me out. And I'm swearing. I really am. I'm cursing. I'm going, this is just fuck, And then they turned to look at me together. They said, we've been waiting for you for thousands of years. And I'm not making that mean anything to me. I'm just saying, okay, fine. But they say it together. You want to build yourself a castle, a better castle than the other ones. You cut out the spades and shovels, and the buckets are all lined up ready for you to make your mark in sandpit land. You cut out a modern hero. Will you stand and watch while Rome is burning, as fantasies of life evaporate? You cut out. Stop shouting, stop shouting, climbing up the walls of first and best and fastest giant. You're running round the sandpit, fighting up the tallest of richest, famous, tallest big shot. Stop blowing, stop blowing, and tell them the struggle, how unfortunate skills and outcomes. You're scaling empty mountains, faking footsteps, faking handholds. You big man giant, you're driving truckloads of emotion, compelling you to dance to sandpit tunes. Rulers bending you to orders, binding you with whispers, teaching you to dream their dreaming, kindly porting up the fences, handing out the sentence, all you know to rule the world with. You're grabbing toys to make a hit, you're trading smiles with other shit, you're thinking that you worked in your house. You're blind to those who guide your way, your rosy glasses hold this way, your sandpit thinking pulls you down. All your might and all your armies, with all your 666 hand signals, and your second twisted regions of living giant. And you think you got the answers, but all you got is dead delusion. You're just stuck inside this no return vortex giant. You're the chosen ones of nothing, you're the golden goose of folly. All the power you claim just doesn't exist, giant. You big man giant, you're tumbling down. You big man giant, you're just a clown. You big man giant, you're tumbling down. You big man giant, you're just a clown. The bird has flown up to the moon to drink its light, caress its face, its empty bliss loves you to sleep.